Hello everyone and welcome to the Bearded Geeks, the weekly grab bag of topics covering movies, comics, video games and TV. My name is Jages, I'm the Beard Master, and you know what? It's another solo week, which means there's another movie for us to unpack. I've been and seen Ant-Man and the Wasp, and it was pretty cool. So let's sit here, let's unpack it, let's do it together like we always do. Let me dole out these thoughts to you and see what you think, see what I think, and we'll just pack it into a nice, tasty little review. We'll call it a review, and then we'll slap a number on the end of it like we always do. So, I'm going to go full spoilers for Ant-Man and the Wasp. So if you haven't seen it, stop now. And I'm also going to go spoilers for Avengers Infinity War as well. So if you definitely haven't seen Avengers, do not listen, because it's going to get all spoiled all up in this place. So, yeah, let's fucking do it. So as always, let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to the first Ant-Man. Now, I enjoyed the first Ant-Man, obviously. I believe a lot of people out there did. And I know for a fact that a lot of people actually didn't like Ant-Man. But I thought it was fun. It was a smaller scale Marvel film. And, you know, yeah, it was definitely fun. You can't hate Paul Rudd. I mean, the guy's unhateable. He's so goddamn charming. You can't hate him. Love the guy. And the guy doesn't fucking age either. It's incredible. Anyway, so I saw Ant-Man. Love that movie, obviously. I had a great time with it. It's a nice fun. I actually really liked Yellow Jacket. You know, I liked Corey Stoll in that role. The only problem I had with Yellow Jacket in that movie was the Pym particle and that he was using or was around. The story plot was why he turned evil was because it was affecting his brain and it was changing his brain chemistry, and like, this isn't you. You wouldn't do this. It's the thing. It's changing your brain and making you evil. It's making you a Marvel villain. But in that regard, I don't think they explained it very well. There was like one passing comment that I think Hope made in the first movie where she's like, it could alter your brain chemistry or something like that. She doesn't actually say it to him. They don't really play on that until the very end, like beginning, like, or into the third act, where they're like, this isn't you, it's your brain chemistry, it's being changed by this thing. And I'm like, hang on a minute. This is like, really, this is the first time you've actually addressed him or addressed the fact that this is happening to him in the third act. You know, he's kind of just been a bad guy up to this point. Are we meant to look back and go, so he's not really a bad guy, it's the thing he's taking in the bloody suit that's making him crazy. But they didn't do a very good job of that, so that's one peeve I do have with that movie. Even though I do like that character. I do like Yellow Jacket, I like the costume, I thought it was very fucking cool. Even though essentially he was Ant-Man in the movie, but that's neither here nor there. So I enjoyed that movie. So coming into Ant-Man and the Wasp, you know, we were looking for something definitely lighter after Infinity War. And I think this is, straight off the bat, I think this is where this movie is going to be judged. It's going to get extra points because of Infinity War. Now, I don't think these are points that it would probably earn on its own without Infinity War coming before it. Let me explain. Infinity War was very, you know, it was kind of darker. It was a heavier movie, obviously, with that ending where half the people and animals that's been confirmed in the universe disappearing, turning to ash. You know, what was left for us to deal with at the end of that movie? You know, it was heavy. It was a heavy ending, okay? And going into Ant-Man being a smaller, funner, lighter film, because of that movie, this is going to score extra points. So if this movie came out like 2 years ago or a year from now, like after the next couple of Avengers movies, you know, I don't think it would score as highly, if you know what I mean. Like if you watch this movie in 2 years without, you know, Avengers, Infinity War and that around it, you'll probably won't regard it as highly, if you catch my meaning. But it's not a bad film. Let me say that. It's not a bad film. It is very enjoyable. I will say, it's a funny movie. I don't think it's as funny as the first, but I did laugh. But I will be honest, I probably only laughed about 2, 3, maybe 4 times. And they were little laughs, so kind of, I think I only really laughed like genuinely maybe once or twice. And I kind of got like, bit of a grinny, you know, grinning exhale, we'll call it. But that's kind of just the gist of the movie. So let's move into the story. The story of this movie is pretty simple, actually. So, if you've seen the first movie, you're aware that Hank Pym's wife, Hope's mother, Janet, she entered the quantum realm, or the quantum realm as they call it, because they can't call it the microverse because they don't have the rights to it. The quantum realm, she went into the quantum realm to stop a bloody rocket and stuff, and she was trapped there. So she's been trapped there for 20 or 30 years or whatever. And with Scott going into the quantum realm at the end and then coming back, the movie starts with Hank Pym, Michael Douglas, saying, I think your mum's still in there, Hope. I think she's still bloody in there. I'm gonna find her. Let's go in and bloody get her. So the whole crux of the movie is these characters trying to enter the quantum realm to find Janet, Michelle Pfeiffer, and pull her back out. Now, spoiler alert, she is in there, but the way the movie starts is, this is after Civil War. They say in the marketing and stuff like, no, this isn't like near Infinity War. This is set after Civil War. But they never actually say how long after Civil War it's set. It's been nearly 2 years. So Scott Lang's on house arrest. He's been on house arrest for 2 years. He's got like 3 days until his ankle monitor comes off and he can leave the house. So he spent all this time in the house. He hasn't been Ant-Man because of the Civil War, where he's gone to Germany and the whole fiasco at the airport where he was Giant Man and everything. So he's looking forward to getting out of the house. So he hasn't seen Hope or Hank in, nearly 2 years. So they're kind of like, their relationship's kind of a little bit split at the moment because he ran off to Germany without them, without telling them, and taking Hank's suit and, yeah, all that fiasco that was caused in Civil War. So he's about to get out of the house, and he's excited because he's able to go and spend time with his daughter, Cassie, his ex-wife, played by Judy Greer, and her husband, Cassie's stepfather, Bobby Cannavale. They're all on very good terms. They're all talking to each other. They're all real nice. They're all hugging and stuff. They're all like a nice little family unit. So he's looking forward to getting out to them and getting back into the world and spending time with his daughter and stuff. And that's all great, and it's all very sweet. But then Scott ends up having a dream of Janet. Like, when he was in the quantum realm, he has, like, this dream, flashes back to the quantum realm when he was in it at the end of the first movie. And he sees her. Like, he's seen her while he was in there. He doesn't, like, subconsciously remember it or consciously remember it. But, deep down, it's somewhere there in his mind. And then he has this vision of... He's having this vision of when... Hope was a child and stuff, but through Janet's eyes, and then he looks in a mirror, and it's Michelle Pfeiffer and stuff, and he wakes up. So then he gets into contact with Hank, and they all end up getting back together, and they find out that he's had this vision because Hank and Hope, they've been developing the quantum tunnel. So it's this tunnel, literally like a tunnel, this big square tunnel, where they can open like a portal into the quantum realm, and they're planning on traveling in to get Janet. But what's happened is when they switched it on, and only switched it on for a second. But in that second, that's when Scott had this vision because he's somehow linked to Janet. So they were somehow quantumly linked. They mentioned this in the movie. Scott actually says to him, do you guys just put quantum in front of everything? So I'm going to say quantum a lot in this, 20 minutes or whatever it is we're going to sit here for. So quantum. They're linked quantumly somehow. So the whole crux of the movie is them trying to finish this machine so they can get in there and pull her out. Now, obviously, they've got obstacles and that in the way. We've got Walton Goggins, who's in this movie. He's like kind of a small-time crook, black market tech dealer. They go to him to try to get like one of these last parts for the quantum tunnel so they can finish it. And, it kind of goes from there as well. But we also have Ghost, played by, now, I forget her name. I don't know how to pronounce her last name properly. It's Hannah John Kamen? Kamen, I believe, or Carmen. She plays Ghost, Ava Starr. She is really good in this movie. Hannah John Kamen? I believe it's Kamen. But she plays Ghost, and she's and I'm doing air quotes here, she's the villain of the movie. But she's not really a villain. She's kind of just a misunderstood person who's in extraordinary circumstances, and she's just trying to get shit fixed. But she needs, like, the quantum tunnel and that for her own reasons. So you've kind of got these two opposing forces who need the same thing. They're both on the clock, time's running out, and it's pretty much these two fighting back and forward over this tunnel for the entire movie. Now, it's a pretty simple story. There's not a lot to it. You pretty much just hook in and go for the ride. Now, going back to the characters, Paul Rudd as Scott Lang, Ant-Man, he is just so goddamn charming, and he is just so relatable. He's kind of like the everyman and stuff that makes it very easy for the audience to relate to. And he's great in this movie, but the one problem I have is I feel like he's a kind of character... I feel like his character's taken a step back in this movie, because you see him in the first, he's very adept, like he's very, technologically sound, he's very intelligent, he knows what he's doing, he knows how to build shit, he knows how to break into safes, he knows how to do a bit of parkour and kind of fight a little bit, but he's an intelligent guy, and I feel like they've taken him a step back for this one, so they've kind of like dumbed down his intelligence a bit. I thought there were maybe one or two scenes where he could have jumped in with Hank and Hope when they were talking like tech stuff and that, and he could have thrown in his 2 cents. But he literally just says like, I got no idea what you guys are talking about. So he pretty much plays like, the dumb guy kind of in this. I think that's because to give the Wasp more room so she can be, more intelligent and stuff. Because this movie is called Ant-Man and the Wasp. So these guys are really got to share kind of that main role. Or those main roles, I should say, because they're essentially playing up the team aspect in this, but I don't think they do it as well. They kind of like, by the end, they're like, what are we going to do? You've got to go into the quantum realm and I'll stay out here and protect. And he's like, no, I'll go in. You two need to stay out here because you guys are a team. And the only way we're going to do this is if you two work together. So I really enjoy Paul Rudd in this movie. Is he as interesting as he is in the first one? I don't think so. I think they try to play up some of the jokes in that in this one a little bit more. The first one felt a little bit more improvisational, but I think where they kind of nailed that improv and those aspects were so funny or went over so well in the first film, they're like, oh, yeah. Remember when we improv that in the first one? That was so good. People really liked that. Let's try and do the same thing again. So it kind of... Some of the comedy in that kind of lacks that bit of charm. And in regard to, like, Luis and that as well, I think that's very apparent. Because, you had those... He goes off on his big storytelling rambles and tangents in the first one and that. They only really have one of those in this. And it feels very... it's still good, but it doesn't feel as, like, we said, improv, like, as original. Like, the guy, Michael Pena's just going off the cuff and just popping out these stories and that, it feels very... That went over well on the first one. Let's do one for the next one. But I really like Paul Rudd. I like what he does in this movie. Now, Evangeline Lilly as the Wasp, Hope Van Dyne, I think she does get a lot of room to grow in this movie, and she is really kind of one of the emotional cruxes of the movie in that as well, because she's trying to find her mother. She hasn't seen her mother for 30 years. But I kind of feel like in regards to like a lot of their stories, they kind of feel, kind of like half to 3/4 baked. So they don't feel like fully developed. So I kind of see the emotional stance for Evangeline Lilly's character, but I don't really feel like it's fully developed. Like it could have gone a bit further and really pulled me in emotionally. And same on the flip side for Scott. I mean, he is under house arrest and he hasn't left the house. He's trying to, if he leaves the house and he gets caught, like he's going to go to jail for life. Or for at least 20 years, they say. So he's trying to be like a good example for his daughter, Cassie. And like he doesn't want to screw that up. He's been in, under house arrest for 2 years and he's about to get out. He's 3 days away and he doesn't want to screw that up. Because, he already feels like he's kind of let his daughter down a little bit. And he's come back to rebuilding that, but, he doesn't want to... If he goes away, he's never going to see her again. So that's kind of his emotional journey in this as well. But, they don't all feel kind of fully developed. I'm kind of going all over the place here. I'm just unpacking my thoughts. That's what we do when we do these things. I just sit down and I literally just unpack it all and just pull out strands and wherever they come, oh, that bit's connected to that bit, and kind of just all over the place. So I thank you guys for hanging in and going along in this process with me. One thing I will say about Evangeline Lilly as well, it got kind of I used to watch Lost, and I really liked her character. I really liked her in Lost. I really liked Kate. I thought she was a great character. But in the last kind of few years and that, I think some of the promo stuff for the first Ant-Man, I saw some interviews and that with her on the promo tour for that movie. And I don't know if it was just me, but in those interviews and stuff, like, she really just came across as a person who didn't really care about the character or the role or where it really came from. She just felt like she was an actress who was chasing the big roles. I don't know if that was just me. That's kind of like, I remember watching a few interviews and I kind of got that vibe from her. Like, she doesn't really even care about this. Like, she just wanted a big role. Like, she just wants a blockbuster role. She wants to advance her career. And now, I don't know if she's still like that, or she was ever like that, you know, but I kind of felt that way, so I kind of got like a little bit of a dirty taste about Evangeline Lilly. But, you know, I hope she's kind of come around, and she is more interesting in that in this film. Very much so. She is given a lot more room to breathe. Michael Douglas as Hank Pym, quite good. You know, a lot of these Marvel movies and that, you know, if a character's kind of like done wrong things in their backstory and that, it's kind of like, oh, I did it because it was the only way I could protect you, or I did it because the bad guys were making me, if they did it, it was blah, 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 or I did it because I thought I was doing the right thing. Hank Pym just seems to rub everyone the wrong way. Like, every person he runs into, like in the first movie, he has like a broken relationship with his daughter. The company he used to work with, he was, you know, outed and stuff, and, you know, nobody really gives him the time of day. In this movie as well, we see Lawrence Fishburne, we see a couple of other characters and that, and you get their history and stuff, and he was like, oh, Hank was a dick, he had all these big ideas, it was his way or the highway. And I really actually like that about his character. Like, he's like quite a flawed character, and I found it more believable because I don't really feel like there's been another Marvel character aside from really Tony Stark, but you know, he's kind of the main gun and we like him anyway. But Hank, you kind of see that, like Michael Douglas kind of plays it like he is kind of a dick. I don't know if that's just Michael Douglas because, you know, of like Wall Street and other roles like that he's played, like in The Game and stuff where he plays characters who are kind of dicks. You know, I think that's just something that Michael Douglas does pretty well. And you just get that vibe and that from him because you're like, oh, Hank must have been kind of a dick when he was younger, you know? Or maybe he was just very stubborn, very pig-headed, you know, and it's just fractured relationships and that he had when he was younger. But that was kind of one aspect that I really liked about this movie. His character. And that backstory and that of him just always, you know, rubbing people the wrong way for whatever reasons, their relationships becoming fractured, you know. It's not just his fault though, you know, it's both sides of the fence and there's always just some kind of a personality clash or something like that, and it just drives them apart. So I found that very interesting. Other characters in that are in here, Michelle Pfeiffer. It's great to see Michelle Pfeiffer and stuff again. You know, what was the last superhero thing she did? Catwoman, Batman Returns in 92. Great movie, great role, one of the things she's most remembered for, but I don't really feel like I see too much Michelle Pfeiffer lately anymore. Saw her in Dark Shadows and that a few years ago, and maybe a couple other things she's popped up in, but she's not really kind of in the real kind of mainstream cinema anymore, but it's nice to see her back in something. Like I said, you got Michael Pena back, you got T.I. back, and you got David, I can't pronounce his last name, Dastmalchian, as Luis, Dave, and Kurt. You know, them and Scott have started a business in that now. Ex-Con, it's called. They've started a security business. It's great to see those three characters back because they were a big part of the first movie and that. And one of the more funnier parts, enjoyable parts of that. So it's great to see them back, even though their roles in this one are limited, are cut down to make more room for Scott Lang, Hank Pym, and Hope Van Dyne. But another one of the great standout characters was Jimmy Woo, who's a character from the comics in that. He's an FBI agent in this movie, played by Randall Park. He's a great asset to this because he does do some of the funnier stuff in this movie, and he has some of the funnier lines. He plays the FBI agent who's pretty much in charge of Scott, and, you know, his house arrest and that. He's like, yeah, the officer in that is kind of in charge, keeping watch of him and stuff. He has some great lines in that. There's this great stuff about magic. What is it, like close-up illusions and stuff, like card tricks and that. There's some great stuff in there about that, like Scott Lang's learning card tricks and shit because he's been under house arrest, and then, yeah, the character picks up on it and stuff. There's some great gags in that in there with cards and card tricks and magic and stuff, so that's really enjoyable. The visuals and the effects, pretty great. The shrinking and re-enlarging and going bigger, like Giant Man stuff, all the effects are great. I really loved in the first movie how when they decided they wanted to do the shrinking, they did it just like in the comics, how it's represented visually. So they'll have, like, say you've got, Hank Pym or Ant-Man shrinking down to ant size. They'll have the character drawn fully and coloured as ant size, but up to human size shrinking, they'll just have kind of like a ghostly outline silhouette and show the shrinking heights, so it looks like it's stacked as he shrinks smaller. And they did the same thing in the movies when Scott shrinks. Like, you'll see like ghostly silhouettes of him as he gets smaller and shrinks. The effects in that are great. Some of the set pieces in that with the shrinking effects in that, especially with the Wasp, are very cool. Obviously, in this one, she's a bit different because she has wings and she's got, like, wrist-mounted blasters and stuff and that. So we get a bit more of a different dynamic with shrinking and enlarging and stuff, enlarging powers in this movie than we did the first one, which is very cool. There's this great scene. You've seen it in the trailers where she's in a kitchen and she shrinks down and she's having knives thrown at her and she kind of twists in the air and the wings come out in slow motion, and then another knife comes and you see her running alongside the knife blade as it's flying through the air. Very, very cool. I always think, like, when I watch these scenes and stuff, I'm like, if the Matrix never existed, like, if this movie came out when the Matrix came out, these effects would be, like, cutting edge. Nobody's ever seen anything like this before. But it's just so funny now, like, all these set pieces and effects and that they do now, and it's just, we just take it all for granted because we see so much of it now. But go back 20 years when The Matrix came out, like, that bullet dodging toward the end of the movie in the third act, like, that was revolutionary, man. But that's influenced so much from then to now. I mean, you see it in everything, like, all these action movies and stuff, you just see so much, and you can just tell it's all influenced by The Matrix. Visual effects are actually pretty good. There's one scene in particular, like Giant Man, you've seen it in the trailer again. It's actually funny because most of the cool stuff or plot-related stuff they've already shown in the main trailers. So there's nothing really surprising in this movie. Like the building shrinking, for example. Like there's like a 12 or 15-story building and Hank shrinks it down to miniature size, and then it's like a suitcase. He pulls the handle out of the top and he's wheeling it along. If they didn't have that in the trailer and they just showed that in the movie, that would have been very cool. But because we already saw it in the trailer, it kind of took away from it. So there's a lot of that cool stuff, like the visual effects stuff and that, like the car shrinking, and then it's underneath one of the four-wheel drives, and then the van re-enlarges and flips the truck and that over down the hill and stuff. That's very cool, but we've seen it all, so it kind of takes away from it. But then at the same time, like, if they didn't show those in the trailer, you wouldn't have got much. The trailers probably wouldn't have been very exciting. So a lot of this stuff is kind of minimal in these movies, you know. Most of the stuff you've already seen, but we'll get to that a little bit more shortly. Like I say, it's kind of disappointing that they show so much in these trailers, and then when you go to see the movie, there's barely any surprises, which is pretty disappointing. But I will say the best visual effect in the movie is the representation of Ghost's powers and abilities. Ghost is actually originally an Iron Man villain, but it's been repurposed to be an Ant-Man villain in this film, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. Costume's very cool. But the way her powers are done, you see her out of the costume, like, the costume she wears, it doesn't actually give her the power. What's actually happened is, in the movie, her father created a quantum tunnel himself. Things went to shit, it exploded, and her parents were killed, but she was exposed to all these quantum, like, energies and stuff and that. And it's pretty much, like, split her molecules apart. Like, it splits every molecule, every atom or whatever apart, and then rebuilds them. So when it's split, she actually phases. So she phases out, so she can walk through a wall, or she can, you know, put her fist through someone, you know, and not have it do anything. But then she can, like, it stitches herself back together automatically, and she's kind of like a real matter person and that there again. But the suit apparently helps her control it, like, helps her contain the power. But the way they've done it in the movie is, like, she'll be there talking, there'll be a scene with Hannah, and she'll be doing a scene as Ghost, as Ava, and she'll be moving around, and then you'll see, like, ghostly apparitions of her. Or if she turns to walk away, she'll start to turn, and then you'll get like it's like a smoky after effect. So you see her kind of looking, but she starts to turn, and then there's like a ghostly image of her as she just was before she turned. And then as she walks off, you get it in that as well. It's very cool the way they do it, and it looks really good. I actually really like that. Now, again, in regards to Ghost, she's not really a villain. Like, she's been trained by S.H.I.E.L.D. to be kind of a, pretty much an assassin, really. So, after, as a child, she got these abilities and that, S.H.I.E.L.D. took her in and they trained her up to pretty much be an assassin, and send her off on missions and shit, because she can literally walk through walls, she can get to anyone, so to go in and kill all these people and stuff or whatever, targets or whatever. But she's not really a bad guy. So her, pretty much the whole crux of her wanting to get the quantum tunnel is that she wants to somehow access energy from the quantum realm, and she's hoping that will fix her, because her condition of, like, the phasing and that, it's degrading and she is going to die. And if she doesn't do something soon, she's going to die. So she thinks that maybe Janet, who's in the quantum realm, she's been there for 30 years and she's been absorbing all these quantum energies. So she believes if she's able to tap into the tunnel, she can absorb the energy out of Janet Van Dyne and pop it into herself, and it will fix her, it will heal her, but at the expense of Janet. Janet's probably going to die. So that's kind of where the evil bad guyness comes into it. Like, she doesn't really care at the end of the day about, sucking the energy and that out of her, even though she's not really a bad guy or a bad villain. Marvel have had a pretty good track record the last few movies, especially like the Vulture, Killmonger, and Thanos. They're really taking a step toward having great, relatable, interesting villains that you can empathize with. This one, Ghost, she's not exactly a Yellow Jacket, but she's not a Thanos either, or she's not a Killmonger, we'll say, for example. She's kind of like walking the middle line. So she's not completely a forgettable villain, but then she's not one of these better villains like the Vulture, Killmonger, or Thanos. So she's not fully there. And you think after those three movies, Marvel probably would have spent a bit more time trying to make her more relatable and stuff, although all these movies were probably all in production at the same time. They have no idea what's going to hit, what's going to miss. I mean, nobody knew that Black Panther was going to be the absolute box office behemoth that it was. Obviously with Infinity War, it's going to make all the money, but, So that's kind of like where Marvel kind of misstepped there a little bit. Like, she's not the worst villain, but she's not the best. She's kind of like halfway there. She's kind of taken a half step to being one of those great villains. If she was developed a little bit more, and maybe there was a little bit more focus on her, because, Walton Goggins in this movie, he is pretty much essentially a throwaway character. They could have completely written him out of the movie. As much as I love Walton Goggins, and I do love the guy, I think he's great. I love him in everything he's in. I rewatched The Hateful Eight a couple of weeks ago, and he's so good in that movie. I'm just so tuned into every performance he does. I love what he does. But in this movie, like, I loved seeing him, but he is essentially, like, a misused and throwaway entity in this. Like, you could have completely done without him. There is a scene early in the movie where they do, Hope goes in to do the transaction to get the piece of tech off him because he's a black market, like, tech provider and shit. They could have just had that as just a one-off criminal and not a recurring criminal through the whole film. And that could have left more room to develop Ghost, to make her a little bit more interesting, to try and push her towards being more of a Vulture or a Killmonger. But unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. Now, as for standouts in the movie, Paul Rudd's great, but I don't think he's as great as he was in the first movie. He was a little more conflicted in that film. Evangeline Lilly's great. It's great to see Wasp get more screen time in this and more to do. She probably has the best action scenes in the movie just because her powers and abilities are so new and stuff we haven't seen before, and her action scenes are definitely the most creative and the most visually interesting. Randall Parker's Jimmy Woo, he's another standout. Just great, like, comedic foil in this movie. Really cool character, really interesting. Always great to see him on screen. It was a lot of fun. But another one of the standouts in this movie is Abby Ryder Forster as Cassie. Now, she's great. She's such a sweet kid. She really, like, holds her own against Paul Rudd in that as well. So, she gives him a run for his money. And obviously Michael Pena as Luis. He's great as well. Although he doesn't really have as much to do in this one. But they try to give him as much to do as the movie will allow, which is fine. Now, as for super spoilers and that, I don't think I really fully went over it earlier, but this movie is set almost 2 years after Civil War. Now, it does set up stuff that I think we're going to see in Avengers 4, because there is, at the end of the movie, we have the credits, and then we have the first post-credits scene. Now, where it takes place, I don't think it's very long after the end of the movie. So maybe it's a month or so after, a couple of weeks or a month after the movie's ended. In the scene, they've created a smaller quantum tunnel in the back of a van, and what they're going to do is, Hope's there, Janet's there, Hank's there, and Scott's there. What they're going to do is they're going to send Scott into the quantum realm, where he's got this little canister where he can collect quantum healing energy for Ghost, because they're now friendly with Ghost and stuff, and they can use it to heal her. So I don't think they've fully healed her and stuff. Like, they've fully got her ability in that maybe under control. Maybe she just needs a little bit of a top up before she's okay. But what happens is Scott goes into the quantum realm. You know, they're doing a radio check and stuff. They're talking back and forward. He opens the canister. He collects the energy. It only takes a few seconds and it's done. He seals it up. And then he's like, okay, I'm done, guys. Ready to come out. And then he gets nothing on the radio. And he's like, oh, come on, guys. This is real funny. He's like, ready to pull me out. And then it cuts back out to the real world. And you just see the three of them. And they've turned to ash. And they're falling. And I was just like, holy fuck, Thanos is just in Wakanda and he's just snapped his fingers. Holy fuck. Literally, I didn't really hear a lot out of people in this movie. I was probably in the cinema with about 20 other people, and I heard a few laughs and that here and there. I had some kids and a parent sitting in front of me in the row in front of me. They're having a bit of fun. You know, they're all pretty young kids and stuff, you know, probably like 10 to 14 or whatever. And they're having a good time. A little bit of talking and that during the movie, but it was fine. But when we saw that scene, when we cut back to the real world and we saw the three of them there and they'd turned to ash and Scott was stuck in the quantum realm, I heard about 6 or 7 people gasp. One girl right behind me, especially, she was like, oh my god, they're gone. Thanos has killed them. He's done the snap. Oh my god, I can't believe it. Now he's stuck in there. He's stuck in the quantum realm. What's he going to do? And that genuinely shocked me because I did not expect to see that, because they kind of play that up. Like Kevin Feige's like, oh, this is set after Civil War. It's, you know, it's not anywhere near Infinity War. Not indirectly saying it's near Infinity War, but he's kind of saying it's more to Civil War than Infinity War. But they're pretty much happening nearly around about the same time. So Scott's gone into the quantum realm, and, you know, perhaps he would have died. He would have turned to ash if he wasn't in there as well. So lucky for him, he was in there. But Janet, Hope, and Hank, they've all turned to ash, and now Scott is stuck in the quantum realm. And I was like, holy fuck. That is like a gut punch. I think that was probably the best moment of the movie, to be honest, the first after credits scene, because that did tie it into Avengers. And with that movie being so heavy and kind of bleak and stuff, and then we watch Ant-Man and the Wasp, and it being a bit more lighter, a bit more fun, a bit more jokey, a bit more sunshine, you know, and it was lighter, and like, that was great. But then leading back into Infinity War, okay, boom, we're going to put you back in this darker mindset, and you're like, oh fuck, like shit is real, like this is big, like holy fuck, like you can't deal with it. So that was definitely very shocking, and tying it back into Infinity War, watching the three of them, like it just cuts back and you just see falling ash. Like there's no physical form in that there anymore. You literally just see 3 streaks of falling ash. You're like, oh, holy fuck, they got me. You've done it again, Marvel. You bloody got me. Clever bastards. So I think I better summarize. I've been all over the place in this one, but that's okay, because that's what we do here. We just unpack it all. Final thoughts. I liked this movie. I did. Is it better than the first Ant-Man? I don't think so. I think Scott Lang had more of an interesting story in that one, you know, kind of being the ex-con coming out of prison. You know, he wasn't a bad guy. He tried to do the right thing, but ended up in prison anyway. And, you know, kind of the relationship he had with his ex-wife and his ex-wife's husband, you know, trying to want him to get back on his feet and stuff. And, you know, then he gets into the whole Ant-Man thing with Hank Pym and he gets tied up with them. It was definitely more interesting. In this film, Scott's story isn't as interesting, but it's still pretty good. Like, he's just trying to do the right thing and just make sure that he doesn't get caught so he can get this bloody ankle monitor off and not go to prison for the rest of his life. Like I said, a lot of the stories or a lot of the kind of emotional arcs and that, like, they don't really, like, all feel fully realized. Like, Hope, like, her emotional story of wanting to get her mother and that back, it doesn't feel like it's 100% there. Same with Scott's story, it doesn't feel like it's 100% there. They all kind of feel half to 3/4 baked, you know? There's a lot going on. But I do feel if they probably took out Walton Goggins, his character and his kind of all his scenes and subplot and all that, there could have been a lot more room to flesh out Ghost and to flesh out these characters' stories a little bit more. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Ghost could have been much more interesting character, almost or as good as like a Killmonger or a Vulture. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Not saying that she's a worse Marvel villain. Technically, not really even a villain. The action in that, some of the action scenes were pretty good. The CG was pretty great. I think it was actually pretty good. There were a couple of de-aging scenes with Michael Douglas where they de-aged him again. For the most part, it looked about 90-95% there, but they did have it like at night, you know, like a darkened area. There's like a lot of shadow and stuff. You can't see too much, but you see a front on for like 3, 4, 5 seconds. But in looking at it, it's not completely there. Like, we're getting closer. Like, every Marvel movie we go, like the de-aging thing, we're getting close. But we're not completely there yet. But it's not a Grand Moff Tarkin from Rogue One. Maybe another 10 years, we'll be there, but we're getting closer. We're getting closer every Marvel movie. If you don't look at it too much, if you kind of squint, it looks perfect. But, yeah, we're getting there. It's a good little film. It's not the best Marvel movie, but it's definitely not the worst. It probably does get extra points in coming off Infinity War because that was bleak, and this is like, this is a breath of fresh air. This is the perfect antidote to the dour Infinity War. So I think it's going to get an extra boosting off that. But if it kind of just came out and was just judged on its own merit, I don't think it would have been held as high a regard as it's getting. Not that it's getting the highest regard, but as high as it's getting. At the end of the day, I'd probably give it a 3 out of 5. You know, it's definitely borderline, straight down the middle medium. It's not terrible. It's not bad. But in a lot of ways, it could have been so much better. And I really hope if they do another Ant-Man film, which I assume they will, because I enjoy watching them. They are fun. I really hope, this is going to sound real bad and real tacky, but they really think big. Like, think of on a bigger scale. And really just tighten down what they're trying to do. Like, remove a lot of these supporting characters and stuff and really just, like, nut it down. Don't bring in, like, 3 kinds of antagonists. I mean, we had Ghost, we had Walton Goggins with the FBI. We had, like, 3 different kinds of antagonists in this movie. And it was a bit much, you know? It's not a bad movie. Would I recommend you going to pay for it? If you're a Marvel fan like me, you're going to pay to see all of them anyway. I don't think I'd go and see this again. I'll definitely buy it when it comes out because that's what I do. I buy all the Marvel movies. I buy it on 4K. It looked great on 4K. If you're going to see it though, I saw it in 2D, but I reckon it'd be bonkers in 3D. So I probably recommend going to see it in 3D. Oh, one other thing I forgot about. The microverse or the quantum realm. After, I really thought I would have seen more quantum realm than I did. And I did want to see more. But I don't think it was as interesting, like after Doctor Strange, like the visuals in that are so bloody bonkers. After seeing that, like this feels like, off-brand bloody lollies compared to those Allen's lollies and that we had, the best kinds of lollies, and now we're getting like this off-brand, home-brand bloody lollies and that. It's not as good. Like, they're okay, but it's not as good. Like, I expected more of that in this movie, like, because they're talking about going in together and all this sort of stuff. I would have expected to see a lot more. And the toing and frying with the building in that as well. I forgot about that. They shrink the building down, and it's pretty much like a, catch me if you can kind of thing. Like, Hank Pym and that have the building, and then Ghost steals it. And then they've got to get the building back from Ghost, and then they get it back. And then at the end of the movie, it's back and forward. It's like, Somebody's got, like, the nuclear bomb bloody keypad. We need to get it back, you know, that kind of thing. Like, and then it's juggling hands. Like, everybody's, like, switching. Oh, shit, they've got it now. We've got to get it back off them. And there's a lot of that. It felt like there was a bit much of that going on. Could have tapered that down, toned that down a bit in that as well. But, you know what, Ant-Man and the Wasp, if you like Marvel movies, you're going to go see it. Paul Rudd's great. Evangeline Lilly's pretty good. Not a bad movie. Not the worst movie. But definitely not the best movie either. Straight down the middle, borderline 3 out of 5 from Jages. That'll do it. Ant-Man and the Wasp. I don't really think I can unpack it more than that. Yeah. That really was an unpack. Yeah. Definitely was an unpack this week. Even when I was sitting there and I was watching it, and I was just like, I don't really know if I have much to say about this movie. Obviously I did, because I've just dragged it out past 40 minutes like I normally do, but yeah. Ant-Man and the Wasp. If you like it, you'll go see it. If you don't, you know, if you can hold off on seeing it, just get it on Blu-ray or wait for it to come on Netflix or some shit like that. It's fine. It's definitely a movie. If you want to find us online, you can find the Bearded Geeks on Facebook, facebook.com/BeardedGeeksPod. If you want to buy a t-shirt, you can go to TeePublic. If you want to listen to the show, you can go to SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. If you want to check us out on Instagram, we are there, and we're also on Twitter. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Bob's going to be in next week, I believe. We're on our fortnightly rotation, and we'll probably have something tasty for you next week. Thanks for sitting here and listening to me unpack this. Like I said, I didn't really feel like I had too much to say about this one, but I did have a bit. Anyway, I appreciate you tuning in and listening. Ant-Man and the Wasp. Go and check it out. Or don't. Thanks everyone. I'll see you next week on the Bearded Geeks. Hey, I'm out of here.